Ethan was used to long days that stretched into nights, his hands calloused from endless hours at the auto shop and his heart tethered to one purpose, raising his little girl, Lily, the best he could. Since his wife had passed years ago, he had learned to live with the quiet ache of loneliness, filling it with routine and responsibility, never allowing himself to imagine that life could offer more. On a damp evening, after a long shift, Ethan took Lily to the park to fly the bright red kite she loved so much. The sky was heavy with clouds, the air crisp with the scent of coming rain, and as Lily ran across the grass, the kite string slipped from her small fingers and drifted toward a bench at the edge of the park. That was when Ethan saw her, a young woman curled up on the wooden seat, her arms wrapped around her knees, her hair wet from drizzle, and her clothes thin and worn as though she had nothing else to wear. Lily, full of innocent concern, ran straight to her before Ethan could call her back. "Are you okay?" Lily asked, her voice soft but carrying the kind of sincerity only a child possessed. The woman lifted her head, and Ethan caught sight of her eyes, tired, red from tears, and hollow with a loneliness he recognized all too well. She managed a faint smile at Lily, then shook her head as though even kindness hurt. Ethan approached, cautious but concerned, and just as he opened his mouth to ask if she needed help, she whispered words so fragile that they seemed to shatter the air around them, "Nobody wants me." The quiet despair in her voice struck something deep in Ethan, a place he hadn't let anyone touch since his wife's passing. In that moment, he didn't see a stranger, he saw someone who had been fighting a battle alone for far too long. His throat tightened, his heart ached, and before his mind could catch up, he found himself kneeling in front of her, his voice firm, steady, and filled with the conviction of a man who understood abandonment but refused to let it define someone else. "I do," he said simply, the words wrapping around her like a promise she had never been given before. And for the first time that night, she looked at him not with despair, but with disbelief that maybe, just maybe, someone truly meant it. Her name was Claire, and it tumbled from her lips as if she wasn't used to anyone asking for it, as if she expected her identity to hold little meaning. Over a simple cup of hot cocoa Ethan bought from the small cafe near the park, she told fragments of her story, not all at once, but in careful drops, like someone testing the water before deciding if it was safe to swim. She had aged out of foster care at 18 with no one to guide her, no home to call her own, and no family waiting at the door. Since then, she had floated from one unstable job to another, sometimes finding shelter in a friend's apartment, other times on church steps or park benches. Trust was not something Claire offered easily. Too many promises in her life had been broken, too many hands had let her fall. But Lily, with her boundless innocence, didn't hesitate. She climbed onto the cafe chair beside Claire and handed her a crayon drawing she'd made on a napkin, a stick figure family of 3 holding hands under a bright sun. "This is you," Lily announced proudly, pointing at the smiling figure beside herself. Claire stared at the little picture, her throat tight, the unexpected kindness nearly undoing her. Ethan noticed how her shoulders softened when Lily touched her, how her eyes lingered on the small gestures of care as though she couldn't quite believe they were real. When the rain grew heavier, Ethan gently offered her a ride home, though she admitted she had nowhere to go. His modest house wasn't much, just a small 2-bedroom place cluttered with toys and tools, but he opened the door wide and insisted she stay, at least for a while. At first, Claire resisted, convinced that kindness always came with a hidden cost, but the warmth of the little house, the smell of dinner cooking on the stove, and Lily's unfiltered laughter eventually disarmed her. She began helping with small things, washing dishes, folding laundry, brushing Lily's hair before school, things that might seem ordinary but felt extraordinary to her. And yet, as the days passed, a quiet fear lived inside her heart, whispering that this fragile happiness could not last, that one day she would be reminded she didn't belong, because no one ever let her stay for long. Just as Claire began to believe that Ethan's home could be hers too, the shadows of her past came creeping back in ways she couldn't ignore. One afternoon, while walking home from the market, she heard a voice she thought she had left behind years ago, rough, mocking, and all too familiar. It belonged to Marcus, an old acquaintance from her foster years, a man who had lived by manipulation and survival at any cost. He grinned when he saw her, calling her by the nickname she hated, reminding her of the reckless nights and poor choices she had tried so hard to escape. Panic flared in Claire's chest as he followed her, suggesting she return to the life they once knew, one filled with quick money and dangerous shortcuts. Fearful that he might come near Ethan and Lily, she hurried away, but his presence left her shaken, dragging her back into the belief that she was nothing more than the broken girl she had always been told she was. That night, while Ethan was tucking Lily into bed, Claire sat at the kitchen table, staring at her trembling hands, guilt pressing down like a weight. When Ethan joined her, concern etched across his face, she blurted out the thoughts she had been carrying, "I'm not good enough for you or Lily. I can't stay here. You don't deserve someone like me." Her voice cracked under the weight of her fear, expecting him to agree, to finally confirm what life had always whispered to her, that she wasn't wanted. But Ethan didn't move away. Instead, he leaned closer, his gaze steady and filled with a certainty she couldn't comprehend. Gently lifting her chin so she couldn't look down, he said, "Claire, I've seen how strong you are. You've survived things most people wouldn't. Lily loves you because you're kind, and I love you because you're more than the past that tried to break you." The sincerity in his voice melted the walls she had spent years building, leaving her stunned and vulnerable in a way she had never allowed before. For the first time, someone wasn't offering her pity, but love, a promise that he wouldn't let her fight her battles alone. In that quiet kitchen, with the soft sound of rain against the windows, Claire began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could stay. Months passed, and the little house that once carried only Ethan and Lily's laughter now overflowed with the sound of a family finding its rhythm. Claire, who had once curled up on cold park benches believing no one wanted her, now woke up to the smell of coffee, the warmth of Lily's hugs, and Ethan's quiet presence that spoke louder than words. She found herself humming while cooking breakfast, laughing when flour dusted her nose, and tucking Lily into bed at night with the kind of tenderness she had never received as a child. Each "good night, Mommy" from Lily filled her heart with both joy and disbelief, as if she were living in a dream she never dared to imagine. One evening, after dinner, the three of them sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, the sky painted in strokes of gold and pink. Claire, overwhelmed by the moment, whispered the words that had once defined her, "Nobody wants me." Her voice carried no despair this time, only a quiet remembrance of the girl she used to be. Ethan reached for her hand, strong and sure, and pressed a gentle kiss against her knuckles before meeting her gaze with the same unwavering conviction he had shown the first night they met. "I do," he said, his tone steady, filled with the kind of love that was not fleeting but permanent. Tears stung Claire's eyes, though this time they weren't born of loneliness or pain but of gratitude, for the second chance she had been given, for the love she had been brave enough to accept. In that moment, she realized she wasn't a visitor in their lives anymore, she was part of their family, stitched into the very fabric of their days. The broken girl who had once believed she was unwanted had finally found a place to belong, and not just anywhere, but in the arms of a man who had chosen her and the heart of a child who called her Mom. And as the stars began to dot the sky, Claire leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder, her heart whispering the truth she now knew deep within her soul: she was wanted, she was loved, and she was finally home.